The work that they do here at the Children's Center is very important, and I know it's important to all of us, and that's why we've chosen to be here tonight. But again, we have a very special guest that's joining us here tonight, and it's our hope, and hers as well, that her presence here and her story will help to inspire others to join her in this fight to end child abuse. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage at this time survivor and advocate Sarah Buell.
Thank you, Jonna. First of all, thank you for having me here tonight. It is an honor to be part of a gala that is of this nature. Assessment centers hold a very near and dear special place to me in my heart because I attended one myself. In 1998, I was molested by my neighbor. Soon after the incident, I had an emergency appendectomy, and while I was recovering, laying in bed with my mom watching a movie as a 7-year-old, she asked me if I had any questions about what was going on. She anticipated that these questions were going to be about my surgery. What she did not anticipate was that I would come forward and tell her about my abuse that I had received very shortly before. Thankfully, my mom had a dear friend that was a mandatory reporter, and when she had the conversation about my incident with her friend, she was told, either you can report it or I can report it. My parents courageously reported my abuse, and after that happened, I was referred to an assessment center very similar to the Children's Center. The center that I went to did not have a medical assessment center until later on, but it had areas for forensic interviews as well as therapy for group, individual, and family settings. The center that I attended also had a grand jury area, which was a phenomenal aspect in my point of view, because the child was always comfortable. They were able to advocate for themselves and tell them their own story in a comfortable setting, very similar to the Children's Center. The center that I attended was actually an old renovated Victorian home. You would walk in and it felt like going to grandma's house. There were toys everywhere, and I ended up befriending a little white teddy bear named Cuddles, who I still have today. A year after my experience with the assessment center, my mom came to me and said that the center that I had been attending was looking for money, and they were going to be talking to a very important group of individuals in order to get that funding. She asked if I wanted to write a letter in order to advocate for the center and to tell my story about how I had had such a positive experience. Well, 8-year-old Sarah did not understand that you can't just walk up to a group of adults and have that conversation face to face. So I said, no, I don't want to write a letter. I want to go and talk to these people. So on my 3rd grade picture day, I left school early and went down to the town hall and spoke in front of the Board of Commissioners, and that was the first time I became an advocate against child abuse. 10 years later, I decided that I wanted to give back further to a center that really, truly changed my life. I went through the Darkness to Light training at the center that I had attended, and it was 2 days of training, very intensive training, where they start from the very beginning and go all the way through the very end of what a child and a family would experience at the center. Needless to say, it was an extremely emotional 2 days for me, and I didn't really anticipate how emotional it would be. But after the first day, I had some very extreme flashbacks of my experience with the Children's Center. It wasn't anything having to do with my abuse, but all of the flashbacks that I had about the assessment center were all extremely positive. And so as I sat in my car crying afterwards, I realized that they weren't tears of sadness. They were actually tears of thankfulness. I had a center that had supported me and my family throughout my entire experience. And one thing that they discussed in the middle of their training was that these children were not victims, they were survivors. I'm gonna let that sink in for a second. They're not victims, they're survivors. These children had experienced traumas that we can't even comprehend, and they were able to make it through and to survive and hope for a life of normalcy. I was blessed in my volunteer opportunities through the assessment center. I got to mentor 3 girls that were about 5 years younger than me, and we got to work on notebooks that were basically like a pre-written diary with prompts and things like that. So we had questions that were ranging from who's your celebrity crush, all the way to what is the most fearful experience you've ever experienced in your life. It was an incredibly eye-opening scenario for me because in the grand scheme of things, I feel that my trauma was not even remotely as scarring as these kids had experienced. But despite the horrors we had all seen, we shared common threads, 2 common threads in particular. We had survived, and we also had bonded through the assessment center. We were able to live a life of normalcy through this center. Assessment centers give these survivors the support and the necessary tools that are necessary to try and lead a life with a sense of normalcy. There's no shame or guilt associated with any of the survivors that come through these centers. And I can genuinely say that I have been able to advocate for child abuse survivors because of the impact that the assessment center I attended had on my life. I know we all hold a dream that child abuse does not exist, but unfortunately, it does. What we need to do is figure out how we can individually and collectively come together to turn the dream into a reality where no child is ever abused again. Please take a moment to watch the following video and consider how you can be a part of making this dream a reality.